All right, we are recording. So hello everybody. Let's get things rolling. As usual, run through the intro, give folks some time to join in and negotiate with signing on to Skype and all that kind of stuff. As usual, we are recording, so please do not share anything that could, cause you any trouble or cause us to go back and edit things out. We don't have time for that. So just be conscious. The Virtual Brown Bag is a place where we get together every week here and we share tips and tricks. We share things that we've learned the hard way, and hopefully by sharing, we can either like better internalize our lessons learned, as well as help out somebody else who may be going through the same kind of difficulties. So this is a good meeting to do that. There's never like a really scheduled topic unless we like prearrange something like, okay, this week we're going to be talking about X. Most of the time it's just, whatever comes to mind, whatever people have listed as lessons learned since we last talked. Logistics, we do this every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time here on Skype. And, everybody is more than free and welcome to come join us. So let your coworkers know about it, or maybe if you know of people who would be looking into learning new things or just getting into software developments, they have lots of questions, send them our way. We are always open to help not just the advanced developers out there, but people who are just getting into it. It's always fun to see what kind of challenges the newcomers are facing. What have been shared before, here's like a partial list of topics. We don't keep these updated because like every week we are all over the place. There's always different kinds of topics, but it should give you an idea that it's really open-ended, right? We've been all over the place. We have a virtualbrownbag.com website where you can always find the link to this meeting here, and as well the links to the videos from the previous meeting. So check it out. There's like a little summary of the main topics that we talked about, so you can search through it and see if you find anything that's grabs your interest. And all right, I guess I'll go ahead, and since I have the screen share here, I'll share two things that came up since we last talked. I've put up a blog post a couple days ago, so I gave in and tried Xamarin one more time because I have a little side project that I felt like Xamarin should be a pretty good solution for what I need just to get this one thing done. Given my previous experience with C#, with XAML based things like WPF, Silverlight, I thought, well, it sounds like something I could get this one feature here that I need done real quickly. Well, 6 hours later from the moment I started, I couldn't get one Hello World app running, so I gave up. Like, no, dude, 6 hours to get something that I didn't even write code. It's like, create new project, run. That's all I wanted to do. And I've run into so many problems with like the Android SDK, trying to install everything that the thing was asking me for, and I couldn't get it to recognize the Android stuff. So I gave up on that and like, okay, let me just focus on iOS, try the emulator first. Couldn't get that to work even after updating Xcode and all that jazz. And then I'm like, well, I have an iPhone right here. I am on my Mac. It should just work. Well, and then of course I'm reminded that, oh yeah, I need the Apple developer membership, which mine had expired, so I renewed that. And then I need the provisioning profile, so I get all that out of the way. And still I get like some obscure error message. I'm like, nah, it's just too much of my time, and I don't have that kind of time. So put that aside. I'll give Flutter, a shot. Have you guys, any of you guys, messed with the Flutter? Do you have any recommendation on like a good like quick start type of tutorial out there?
I have not.
Yeah.
I was going to say something. Nope.
Nope. I think it's just you.
I have not. I remember there were a couple conference talks on it because it was like all over the conference scene like a couple of years ago, like in 2017. And I remember, so they were talking it up as like being really, really easy to get started. I think I mean, it's Dart, so the language itself shouldn't be unfamiliar or anything.
Right.
Yeah, I think for the most part it should be really easy to get started, right?
Okay.
I built a ping app in it, like a small one, years back before it was 1.0. It is really easy to get started and get going. It's fun. Dart isn't that hard to pick up.
Good. Yeah, that's so like some of the reasons why I decided to take a look at it, hopefully next weekend, is because I've seen a lot of people like in my social networks talking about it and how they are doing things, and some are have like Udemy training courses up online. So I'm like, well, at least I know some resources. I know some people I can poke that have been messing with it. I looked at Dart and it's like, okay, it looks, C sharp-ish, it's object oriented, and it's like, oh, okay, seems like it's something I could pick up. Something that I didn't quite like yet and I need to experiment is that everything is really described with the Dart syntax, like the visual parts of it, where I do like seeing like markup to describe visual things like XAML or even HTML or whatever. And I don't really like seeing, C-like languages describing visual things. But that's just me. I guess I need to get over that and, try to focus on the getting things done type of thing. Um, right now, my main requirement is I just need something really easy to be able to target Android and iPhone, right? And I do not foresee it being like a huge application. It's going to start as like a glorified to-do type of app, and then eventually you'll start adding some more things, but it's really based on some very specific things that I do as a motorcycle track rider. I have some things that's, I started building systems around that to help me with my logistics for that. It's like, well, if I can get something real done really quickly with whatever platform, I'll be happy with it. But since it's something I'm going to be doing on the side, it has to be productive. Like if I have like 1 hour this evening, another hour over the weekend, it has to be productive. I don't have time to be tweaking with SDKs and devices, and I just need something to get it done. So
Yeah,
I'll be reporting as I
it'd be
experiment with
good
it.
for something like that then.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, glad to hear it. I did see somebody, I don't remember where I posted a question and somebody said, well, yeah, for cross-platform things, yeah, you may get started with that for simple apps, but then as things start getting more enterprisey, then it falls short. I'm like, yeah, I don't ever see this like I have to becoming enterprisey, right? It should be just a set of small features for convenience, because like when track riders are at the track, we want to ride our motorcycles. We don't want to be like on the phone doing things. It's more like, well, I need to look up my checklist for my track riding hobby. Or I need to look up, okay, what are the lap times that I did last time I was at this track, right? So it's a lot of like just reviewing some information, less so than actually entering information. We don't have much time for that when we're out there. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no problem. I think it'll actually be. Oh,
I've
sorry.
heard
Go ahead.
good things about Flutter tooling too. So keep an eye out for that. I'd be interested to hear about it.
Sorry, you guys were overlapping. I didn't catch the whole thing.
Oh, I was saying I've heard really good things about Flutter tooling too. So I'd be interested to hear about it.
Hmm. Is it the tooling? What I've seen so far from the real quick research is just some add-ons for VS Code that I've seen people using. Is there anything beyond that that I should be aware of?
That I don't know. Brendan, you said you worked with it.
Yeah, I used VS Code, and again, this was about 2.5 years ago now. Um,
Uh,
so I, I can't imagine you needing anything more than VS Code.
Isn't it like particularly good as far like there's a particularly good emulator or something so that you don't have to have like go all the way to the device every single time.
Yeah, and it does automatic hot reloads while you're deving.
Right. Like, because it's not like good workflows with Android and stuff like that are impossible. It's just like they're not the default, and from what I understand, like really difficult to set up. It's pretty difficult if you don't know what you're doing really well, let's say.
Okay.
And I think Flutter is supposed to like come with one out of the box that just like it guides you through. But again, this is all like third person I'm hearing.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely, as I experiment with it, I'll document my findings and share as we go. That's cool. And then just one more thing I can share that I've learned the previous week. So in writing some Cypress tests, I've just run into the situation where, well, a bunch of my tests have been impacted by the fact that now certain routes in an Angular application are protected by a guard, right? So we can only visit those routes if the user is authenticated. So as soon as we put in the logic with the guards to reroute the user if he's not authenticated, well, now it broke all of my tests. So this is what what I've learned so far to address that. For the authentication piece, we are using Akita as a state management. So the tokens that get created, they get put in there. And since Akita is similar to Redux, I ended up finding this article here that talks about, well, yeah, you can like, if you put the store and make it available in the window object, only if you're inside or running the app inside of Cypress, you can retrieve that object, and then you can dispatch actions into Redux to then update whatever it is that you need in store to help with your guards to let you through. So I found that, it's like, okay, that is cool. And then the way I found, yeah, not on this one. So essentially, as I was visiting in some of the tests, I was going, okay, visit this route. And then I've learned that I can use the then, right, on the promise to say, okay, then you go to the window, you put in this token here, and that will let you through with the route. Now, of course, I don't want to do that on every test where I'm visiting all the routes, because pretty much like 98% of the routes are protected. So that would suck. And then I've learned that we can, in Cypress, create both custom commands, or you can override some of the default commands. So for example, the visit is a default one. So you can override it, right? You do whatever you need here, and then just return the original function if you want to chain those calls. So armed with that, I've also learned that for the specific need that I have, I've found out about this onload hook that I can use as part of the options when we override the visit. So that's essentially where I've put in my logic, right? So I have an onload that in there, and it receives the window object. So I can read that store object that I put in only when running inside of Cypress, and then do that kind of work. And anytime in those Cypress tests, when I'm visiting certain routes, I can detect, okay, is this supposed to be an authenticated one? If so, this is how you bypass that authentication so you can get through the routes. So that's it. Anybody with experience in Cypress who knows a better way to do this, or how wrong I am into going down this route?
I don't really, but can't you just like set up something within Cypress that just you give it a stub token? Because I assume your authentication is coming from like there's just some JWT or something with like all your permissions.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and what is that like loaded through local storage? Can't you just in your Cypress tests insert into local storage whatever you want?
I can, but that's the thing I don't want to do that on every single test, because it's really going to be pretty much on every single test because all of the routes are protected, right?
Sure.
So this is exactly what I'm doing. So I found out, like in Redux, you can do something like that. So I'm doing something similar, but in Akita, right, where I get the store and I dispatch the action that we normally have in the real app, right? When we make a call into the API that returns that token, we dispatch that action that Akita will actually grab that value and put it in the store. And from there on, the guards, the Angular guards can read that out of the state and make the decision as to whether or not the user is allowed in or not. So that's the part where instead of going through every single test and stubbing that token, I'm just overriding the visit command and just say, hey, if you're visiting something that's protected, here, this is the token that you should use, and that's going to let you through.
Yeah, you're in Cypress land for me here, so I don't really know. It seems complex, but a lot of stuff about Angular seems complex. So not.
Yeah, I mean, overall, this is like 5 lines of code spread through like 3 files, I would say. It ended up being not complex by overriding the command, the Cypress command, right? As opposed to like going through every test and always saying, oh, hey, you need to stub out, the token like this, like this, like this. So just doing that in one single spot.
Okay.
So that's it for me.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything that they want to show off? Or I could talk about some stuff. Lord knows if anyone wants to hear it, but same as ever.
I don't have anything. You just posted in the channel, and I was like, okay. So
yeah, sure. So first of all, just some news. It does seem like I'm going to be kind of moving on from my position, likely in the new year. That I work at a nonprofit. They obviously so part of what I was supposed to be doing was kind of setting up this business unit where I was setting up a dev shop to help train our grads and so on. And does see it, and like with COVID, all of the opportunities for that kind of have plummeted. So it kind of becomes like there's a nonprofit, there's a funding issue for them, which is fine, whatever. So, but I am probably going to be on the lookout in a bit, though. I'm also trying to arrange things in such a way that I don't have to like find a job for most of 2021 and just actually get some time to work on some of my projects. Maybe write a couple of blog posts. I don't know if that'll happen realistically. I was in the shower today, just trying to like make a schedule in my brain. Be like, no, this all keeps coming out to like way too many hours. Just like the things I want to do that are like high priority. Yeah. So yeah, it's a whole thing I'm trying to decide now, which is like, like I could do it. The big limitation is like health insurance or like the family, right? So on that, but hopefully I can make it work. Kind of do what I do, work on my own stuff for 5-6 months while kind of slowly taking my time picking the right position. But anyway, personal news aside, I've been mostly like finishing up a Node.js project right now. So I haven't done a ton of stuff except for this weekend. I did finally get a chance to hack on something that I actually wanted to do a long way back, and I couldn't quite find like the right way to do it. Then I finally thought of how I wanted it to work, and then finally managed to get it working. So I can share my screen, and it is org mode Emacs hacking, but hopefully you think it's cool anyway. Let's see. Boom. Ooh, that phone call coming in. I am gonna ignore that. Hopefully it wasn't a job offer. Okay.
If they really want to hire you, they'll
No,
call you
right?
back. Don't worry.
I know. So here is kind of the deal. I love using org mode in order to learn. And the thing, actually, let me pull up beautiful, right? And as y'all kind of know, I talked about Racket a lot. I really like Racket. I think it's a really fascinating language with so much to teach. So I Racket itself, they have an editor they create. They recommend Dr. Racket. It's pretty cool. Much like Racket, it's got a lot of neat, innovative ideas. It is totally what I would recommend for someone who's like, like while learning programming or something like that. To me, as someone who's like got a super developed workflow and super particular about it, Dr. Racket drives me nuts. Like, it doesn't have great, it has really poor Vim support and right, not good windowing that works the way I want it to work. And I mean, it's a Lisp. Emacs should be good enough for it. So I want to be able to write in there, and especially because my workflow is heavily org mode centered. So what I want to basically be able to do is, is write bits of code, blocks of code, right, and run them and have it work, right? So the way that works with org mode, drop in here in general, is, let me make it larger, enhance. Yeah, so you tell it, I'm gonna do Racket, and now I need, you know what, let's actually set font size, because now all the other buffers need to be larger too. There you go. Yeah, 14 is big enough. All right. So so I'm coming in here, and so Racket itself is a list, but Beautiful Racket specifically is all about implementing custom languages. So the idea is I should be able to do something like, so this is for an example from their Stacker application. So this is something that I have installed system wide as like his library and his examples. So I can declare a language that comes out of, the globally installed packages on my system, and inside of there, I'm doing this for 5 plus, so postfix notation, let's say 3 minus, and let's say, hold on. And I think it, like, let's say that's all I want to do. And I don't think this will work. I think there's one other thing I have to do. This. What am I missing? Stacker demo. Let me just copy it from this other window. Module stack. Oh, stacker. There we go. There you go. So I can run it, and it's a basic stack-based calculator, right? The comma is there just because of, I believe, how the, well, actually, that works. Does it? Yeah. Okay. I don't remember why I had the comma there in my notes. Okay, so this is like a very useful workflow for me because I could do that. I can write, stacker. Stacker is Stacker is so cool. And then, be saying like, okay, here it is. Here it is. Ah. I did not just paste that link. What is going on?
It seems really useful, George.
It's it's super great and super useful and hush. No, like this. So it's really nice. This is kind of how I like to take notes. You can do all sorts of stuff like things I want to do next. At the code and read the next example, so I can make checklists and so on. Check them off with a list and get like summaries. I can schedule things. But org mode has a bunch of stuff in it. It's cool.
What's the benefit to writing out notation for maths like that?
Oh, of this? So
Yeah.
I mean, this is just like about learning how to implement your language, and the language itself is a calculator.
Right.
From in general, from just a logical point of view, postfix notation, which this is,
Right.
a ton more clear cut because you never end up needing parentheses to group things. Like it always is clear what's happening. So without parentheses at all. So if I do 5, well, actually, I'm trying to remember if this is exactly the same thing as that or not. So like that would take the result, the intermediate result, and multiply by 5, and then another by 3. Oh, see, it actually inserted that comma for me for some reason. Yeah, I mean, just in general, postfix notation, just logically, is better, or prefix notation, whichever way you run it, whether you write it at the beginning or the end, because it's not you can start doing stuff like, well, okay, some operators, right, take only one argument, like a square root operator, right? So you kind of don't have to think about those things as much and grouping. But again, I don't want to get into that. I'm only barely a math guy, so I don't want to try to like justify it a bunch. I'm just talking about learning. Right. So Emacs by itself doesn't run Racket. There's a plugin into org mode called OB Racket. And some time ago, I forked it. And I've been contributing back some improvements to it. One of the things that I wanted to do was to be able to experiment with making my own languages like this. And so the way that you would do that when you make your own language, right, unless you are like building stuff and installing it globally, is you need to have a file where you define your language. So for example, I'll bring this in here. We have an example of the reader, this one. So it's going to look like this. Racket. So it looks like that. And then, so now you see, like, it is a Lisp. This is a pretty basic Lisp. This BR quick lang is just basic Racket with a couple things built in to make it a little easier. But other than that, it's just basic Racket. So this is basically defining how you're reading things. This says, okay, start reading the lines. Go ahead and we're going to create a function called source. We're going to create a variable called the source datums, which are going to hold that. And basically for that, we are taking source lines and mapping it over kind of this thing and sticking it in this format. So you're putting the word handle in front of everything, right? And then you're wrapping it into what's called a module and then outputting that. So the idea is that I should be able to take this, point it at some location, the file somewhere, .rkt, right? So let's call it basic language that doesn't work. right? And then it should run. And this isn't going to work because that file doesn't exist. And that's where it kind of starts becoming a problem, because the way this execution stuff works in org is that when you go ahead and evaluate this block, it basically generates a random file and a random directory, drops it in there, points the evaluator of your choice at that file. So what I need though is to have this right here be in another file that's adjacent to it. So it took me a while to figure out even how I wanted that to work. And what I end up coming up with is something like this. So in org mode, you have the ability to give names to things. So I'd go ahead and give it a name. And I'm going to call it basic language. That doesn't work. Okay, great. And what I'd like to do is then be able to say, all right, I'm going to say there's an adjacent file. And then I give it the name of a block, right? And I would maybe spell that correctly. It doesn't work. So actually I spelled it wrong here too. Yeah, so I give it the name of a block, and then what it would do is create a randomized directory, go find all of these files, go find any of this block, write it into that directory in a file with that name, write this file into that directory, run it, and then do cleanup. So I actually went ahead, look at that. So when you run it, you get it working like that. So it's actually taking this right here and converting it into a racket program that looks like this. So I got that working by hacking this OB racket stuff, and I even have kind of an example here. You use it to build up the actual calculator. Like, this is what the language implementation looks like. In fact, let me grab that to demonstrate it. Put that in there. Put this in here. I run that. It spits out, there we go, 36. So this is like so I'm very excited about this because, like, I put Learning Racket on the shelf. I mean, for one thing, I didn't have time, but I kind of also shelved it for like a couple months because I didn't have this ability. I was completely blocked on this one workflow, which is like the workflow I think really, really works well for me. And I feel like I've just like unlocked a whole like chest of stuff that I can now do. So I can kind of talk through a little bit of the code because I have thoughts on Emacs Lisp, which this is written on. Emacs Lisp is mostly terrible. Like, it's a Lisp, and the Lisp parts of it are swell and are saving grace. But like, if you have problems with like PHP being inconsistent and like all a million global library functions that like how they use it has no consistency and doesn't make sense, like that has nothing to do on Emacs Lisp, which is just basically like whatever Richard Stallman thought of at any moment, I guess. So I like I said, I did manage to get it working. It's it does seem to work. It does seem to work and do stuff, but like there's certain things within it that are just wild. Like, for example, the standard way of interacting with other plugins doesn't really seem to be that, okay, well, they just expose an API. Instead, what you do is you kind of simulate the user doing things actually in the editor. So like when I need to do things like find the block which is named this, right? There's not like an API I can access to say, hey, org mode, give me all the blocks with that name. Instead, it's literally like, all right, position yourself in that buffer. And then run this function name or I don't know. Run this function that does, where are we? Run this function org babel find name block, right? So let's see, org babel find one of these, right? And then go to that source block and then run the code that will expand that source block. And then grab that and expand it into a temporary buffer and grab it from that temporary buffer. So it's like this very kind of Rube Goldbergian way of working with this stuff, which Emacs kind of makes sort of okay by giving you really good facilities for how to basically memorize the state of your document before I did this and restore it after I did this. So it's kind of a really interesting experience because it's a very different level than what we're used to thinking about. Like, right, there's this save excursion function, which basically says, I'm going to go do some stuff to this buffer. I'm going to move around it. And when I'm done, just restore everything. Like, oh, okay, fine. And then, it has kind of similar ideas in terms of creating temporary files and so on, though those are a little different because none of this is consistent at all. But yeah, like this is like a whole kind of world of interesting stuff that I'm slowly sliding into. That's, at the same time fascinating and very overwhelming, but definitely has a bunch of stuff that I feel it can teach. So if anyone else is interested in playing with Racket and like the few other people in the world that like org mode, I have a plugin for it that now works way better than the other things available, especially for this sort of thing. That was kind of my spiel. That was pretty long, probably.
That's good, man. That's so far beyond my level of geekness.
I mean, I don't know. It's just some lists. Which sounds like a lot, but like it is a really simple language at its heart. It's like simpler than any of the other languages.
Yeah, it's like the progenitor.
Yeah, it's like C is simple. Well, yeah, but you're still dealing with a computer. Lisp is simple because it's this abstract thing. I'm like, yeah, it's just functions. It's just lists, really. It's just lists, and sometimes we look at them and see functions. Yeah.
I'll take it.
Anything else we should talk about? I guess I have other stuff on my list. Let's see.
How often do these brown bags happen, by the way?
Every single week. I mean, we didn't do it last week because, holidays.
Thanksgiving.
For the most part, every single week. What else do I have in my notes? Oh, okay. Oh man. Did we talk about classes versus functions at some point last month, Claudio?
I think last month, yes. I was gonna say I do remember that. It's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I thought we did, and I just didn't check it off on my.
Yeah, we did September the 3rd.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's see what else. I've been having an interesting time playing with LocalStack, which is I talked about it a little before. LocalStack is the AWS in a box, so in a Docker container thing. LocalStack. Yeah. So I just finished my project, kind of doing like the final day of docs on it, and there's really a cool amount of stuff in it. Like we actually never even created AWS accounts, but we're still writing kind of this cloud first application by using it now. Like again, like if you are on like a long-term project, you have access to ops people, you have people who can tell you how to set up good workflows, or you know this stuff well. I don't know that I would recommend this. Although it turned out to be a total lifesaver when like there was that hurricane and internet was failing everywhere. I was like, well, we can still work because it's local. Um, but for situations where you're like very, very resource constrained, you're like, we just need to be able to hack this together, but we want to be able to use these features like SNS, SQS, to some degree Lambda, though their Lambda stuff is a little broken, Dynamo, DB. Um, like this worked really, really nicely for us, where I could just integrate in my workflow, and as long and like it just AWS SDK pointed at this thing, I didn't have to worry about IAM or setting up roles or anything like that, which would have taken me like a week just to figure out. And it was just like as long as and then it was just like, okay, use it, right? So when an application boots up, it does a request to make sure that all the SNS and SQS queues are created. S3 is created and starts doing all this stuff. And like I haven't even explored most of this yet, but I've got to imagine this would be a reasonably nice way to even learn this stuff. I'm certainly going to keep it in my back pocket. Although admittedly you don't get any like nice UIs for these things, but just that's not, you don't really need the nice UIs when you're just like, I just need to code against it and write code and be able to put in a message here and appear over there. So it's far from perfect. It has some issues, but I definitely recommend like looking into it if you're like in that sort of situation. You're like, we need to get started with this. We need to make it have use to this stuff. Be cloud first. We don't have time to figure out the ops, but someone will be figuring out the actual deployment and the ops later on. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that was really cool. Let's see, what else? I know I talked about it before, but I think I talked about it in the sense of the problems I was having with it. But I feel like I did a talk recently on technical writing. That was fun.
Okay.
And I did a bunch of notes on it. I think so. So there's an interesting, actually. I do have like conferencey slides, I think, on my own account. Technical writing. Let's see, drive.
How do you like Brave?
It's fine. I mostly don't notice it. Oh shoot, I don't have it on here. Well, here it is. It's this one. Mostly I don't notice it. I guess it's probably a little bit faster. But yeah, for the most part, I will say so I use it on my phone too, because like it's a bigger deal on my phone because like all the stupid ads that you're like scrolling, you click by accident, and so it does help minimize those. But it definitely run into issues with, like, for example, trying to pair my Rocketbook or my Dropbox and like set it up there, and just bad security settings make like webhooks not work properly. So if I set it as the default browser for my system, like I can't log into Dropbox, I can't log into Rocketbook. Like I have to set it to Chrome, do the login, then switch back to Rocketbook, and then switch back to Brave, which is just frustrating. And it took a while to figure out. So I was doing a lot of reading about about technical writing because I needed to create this proper presentation for our boot camp about how to do it because we were insisting people do documentation, and I was like, we never taught them anything about this. So I found this kind of a pretty interesting mental framework from, I believe, Jacob Kaplan Moss proposes this. Yeah. And so he views all technical writing as fitting in one of these categories where it's either a tutorial, so a tutorial, conceptual, or reference, and each one has different goals. And it's really useful. First of all, you start seeing this when you kind of buy into it and agree with it. You start seeing this in other documentation, but also like when you're writing, you should always be aware what type of thing that you're writing for because it comes with different goals. So with, like, for example, tutorial writing, the goal is that someone can sit down with this and in under, let's say, an hour and a half, get a good feel for what your system's all about. They don't have to know all the ins and outs. They shouldn't know all the ins and outs. You want to be careful about like the ramp up, but you want to leave them. You want to basically put them in a situation where their appetite is whetted. They kind of know the different directions to go from there, and that's what a good tutorial does, right? It shouldn't be too hard, though it also shouldn't be too easy, because if it's too easy, you run the risk of people finishing the tutorial, going on to the other documentation, and just hitting that complete vertical ramp, and that's very dispiriting. So it's better just to be a little hard at the beginning, because those people will just drop out early on, just totally on board. Then you have kind of the conceptual guides, which is the documentation which covers all the concepts of your application in detail and the abstractions and how you think about it, like the architecture. And again, the goal there is really, so at least by section, people are coming there and should be reading it end to end, right? So you keep it relatively short, but try to be really direct and to the point and comprehensive, right? Here's all the different types of things that you could do with this component. You don't have to go over every single option, but they should be able to read it and be able to understand on what the options would be. And then the reference, which is specifically for people who come there looking for a specific thing. So it's important to have it like be super indexed, like extremely cross-referenced everywhere. And like that's an example where I think like Racket documentation actually does a really, really awesome job in their docs, where like everything is super cross-referenced. And it's, it's tough. It's like that's not actually an example of their docs. It's something else. It's tough because it's very technical, but like they have, you can just see how many, every single like keyword you use is reference, is cross-linked. It's all very much aimed at, I'm coming here, I'm seeing this, and so on. The one thing like they don't have that I would actually recommend they have, and other places when you do documentation, for every single function and for every single reference, have a see other section when the author could drop other stuff you should probably be aware of if you're looking at this, right? So that's kind of, that to me was a really interesting mental framework for thinking about this stuff. And I actually would go on and say like there's actually a fourth category, which is marketing, because sometimes you're just doing technical writing, or there's subsections of your document, especially in this day and age where everyone comes to the README and reads the README first. And so on GitHub, where you are really doing marketing. You're not doing anything conceptual or guidance or tutorial. You're pitching them on what the heck the product is and trying to get it hyped up, right? And that's where like badges come in and all that stuff you see all over READMEs, because here your point is like hook people in.
I've never, it's so interesting that you mentioned that. I never thought about readmes that way in GitHub, but yeah, you're totally right. Like so many times it's like, well, like yesterday, I was looking up one of those admin gems for Rails just to put like a something where I can maintain the backend data on one of these side projects. So I look it up, like Rails admin, and then like 2 or 3 show up. That's exactly what I did. I scroll down to the README to see, okay, what does it look like? Oh, no, I don't like this API. What? Oh, this one looks good. Never thought about it as a marketing thing, but that's eye-opening.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, so like this is by a guy named James Scott. He has, I don't actually agree with him on everything, but I mean, he does kind of talk about READMEs, and he doesn't explicitly talk about them as marketing, but he does talk about, like, you want to add a logo, you want to badges and shields and screenshots, and like, yep, that's what that is. And none of the, and like, this was part of the reason, like, in the comments I was arguing with him, was like, none of this makes sense until you start thinking about, oh yeah, sometimes it's just marketing. And that's fine, because you presumably want people to use their product, or at least you need to tell them how to use it. So I have a whole presentation about it that I do. I'm not going to like go through all of it right now, but yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Does anyone have any documentation they particularly enjoy and think is really well written?
Typically, when I think of like really well maintained docs, I think of Vue.js, especially for Vue, how they migrated from Vue 2 to Vue 3. I thought it was a really good job.
Really is. So I still have only done Vue for like literally a day. So that's interesting. Yeah, so you come here, why Vue.js? There's your video. That's going to be it, right?
I think if you go back to, you found it. That was it.
Well, that's to get started.
Yeah.
But Vue.js, that's going to be, why Vue.js? That's marketing. And look how easily accessible that is right there. It doesn't even take you to a different page. It's embedded directly in here. Here you go. Get started. So get started. And then these are your blocks. So yeah, you look at this and right away, like, all right, this is kind of, well, actually, this is, I guess, conceptual docs right here, right?
Yeah, if you look over on the side where it says guide, and next to it is the version number, there's a drop down.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. 3X. And so you can go to 3X. And I don't, from my position, I thought it was a really clean migration from 2 to 3 in terms of like keeping everyone up to date with what was happening. And like it says, the components in depth, it goes pretty in detail in some of the articles.
That's pretty, yeah. So these are clearly those conceptual ones, because these are not, this isn't reference material. Yeah, this isn't, these are the conceptual, and I'm like looking in here, like it looks like some of this stuff is maybe tutorials. Yeah. Oh, cookbook and examples are maybe tutorials. Yeah, I would maybe put a little more tutorial stuff front and center though. But yeah, and then there's the API reference. So yeah, that's well done. Do they cross-link it a lot? That's my big like thing that I'm beating the drum on lately. I would love to see like this stuff just being like cross-linked to high heaven, so I can read through this and then like that, because without, if they do that, then I actually don't have to get the thing that I'm searching for correct to find it. I just have to get kind of in the area and then be like, oh, okay, no, here it is. This is what I'm searching for.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah. That's cool stuff. Claudia, you have any docs you really like?
I can't think of docs that I really like. I can think of like docs that I don't like. Like I don't know how it is these days, but not until too long ago, like the MSDN stuff, where it's like, oh, you find the documentation for the do something method, and then it says does something. It's like, really?
Yeah, it was terrible for a while.
I've got a question. I just joined a company that for all intents and purposes, doesn't appear to have internal docs. How would one go about like suggesting that we should have them and building it?
I mean, what I've done at almost every company I've done is like during onboarding, I just documented it.
Right.
And I gave it to them, and then I helped them set up a place where that document should live, because they're like, oh, this is great. It's like, okay, great, where did I put it? And then it was like, And a lot of times, like, that's kind of the issue, weirdly enough. Like, just no one at the company bothered to come up with a place. So the issue is like, everyone's like, yeah, I agree, we should have documentation, but a place doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So, and if you even notice people who were when Slack first came around, to some degree you still have people like this. It's like, it's great, it's a place to put your documents. I was like, and for me it's always been like, yeah, it's like 100% worse than every other place to put your documents. But then that
yeah.
Oh right, they had no other place to put your documents. They just had like a Dropbox folder that the CEO shared. So sure, yeah, it's better than that.
So step one is finding some sort of, I don't know, repository equivalent to a wiki to share information at. Got it.
Step one is just write the document.
Well, that part's that's done. I've already made notes of what I've been doing, so I just need somewhere to like insert it.
Yeah, so you share it, you show it people, get them to buy in that it's useful, and then you can start proposing where it goes.
All right. On that note, I got to head out. Thanks for hosting this. Thanks for sharing today, you guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you for joining us.
All right, later.
Yeah.
Later.
I'm actually about to have to drop too, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Go grab a bite before the next meeting.
All right. Thanks a lot. Talk to you later, man.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Go, guys.
All
Bye,
right.
Tony.
Bye.